This is going to be a long ride. Hello. I've been wanting to cover this subject for a long time, and this is going to be about villagers and villages. But while investigating, you can see this is a very wide subject. There is a lot of information to cover, and I decided to make a small series because this is impossible to cover in one single video, unless you will want something as long as a movie. Welcome to a new video of Ep.01, and today we will learn about villages and its mechanics. So let's begin. This is a village, and this is a structure that generates naturally on our overworld. According to the Minecraft wiki, a village is a group of buildings that generate in the overworld. And this is a villager, the mob that habitates the villages. Now, I don't actually like this definition of village. Of course this is a village, but this is limited only to natural structures that the game generates. But defining village is not that simple, and we will need to cover some elements first. The first thing we need to know is that villages is something that we are going to encounter if we go around the world exploring. And depending on the biome where the village is generated, the type of village is going to be defined. Which takes us to the first type of village, the taiga village, which is the one we are now observing. You're going to see that the materials and the style of the buildings is dependent on the biome. For example, here in the taiga, the components are made of spruce wood. And the roofs have steep slopes. Our second type of village is probably the most common one, the plains biome village. In this case, of course, the plains biome is one of the most common in the game. This type of village also generates on the meadow biome, and its villagers look like this. You're going to observe that the structures are made out of oak wood and some cobblestone. But some of the houses are also made out of terracotta and stripped oak wood. This is a desert village. Here the houses are made out of sandstone and some terracotta. The houses of a desert village have no roof and no slopes, because in this biome it never rains. You're going to see some small houses and this tall tower. And starting from 1.20, these are the villages that contain one camel each. The fourth type of village is the savanna village, where most of the houses are made out of acacia wood. Some of the houses are over the floor, and some of the walls are made out of acacia logs that are not stripped. And their villagers look like this one. The fifth type of village that naturally generates is this one, the snow village. And this one is by no means the most common one. This type of village generates on very cold biomes, and the skin of its villagers look like this, which is kind of a blue color. Most of its buildings are made out of spruce wood. And I would also like to talk about this pseudo village, which is this igloo. Let's go in, and I'm going to explain why this is a pseudo village. This is because currently it is not a village still. So if we go underground, towards the basement, we come down here and we're going to find these elements. We have everything necessary to start a village over here. Here we have one villager. And then a zombie villager, including all the elements we need to turn it into a live villager. Then after this we can get them out and start a village with these two. Now that we saw the 5 types of village, we're going to get into the more technical part of the video. And at this level we're going to see what composes a real village. So we just need 2 types of elements. One are the mobs, or villagers, and the second one is what we're going to call points of interest. There are various mobs and villages. The first one is the villager. We also have the babe villager, the cats, the iron golems, and a few farm animals. Within these, there are various. They can be pigs, sheep, cows, or horses. Out of all these, the only one that is absolutely necessary to form a village is the villager. And we're going to see the 3 types of blocks that are also components of a village. One is the bed. The other one is a workstation, both of which can be claimed only by one villager. And the third one is the bell. which we'll talk later. Out of these 3 blocks, the only one that is necessary for a village is the bed. But if we come over here, the best way to explain you what composes a village is by an experiment. First, you can see this igloo I installed over here. Inside this igloo there is a villager and a bed. If we only have one villager, this is not a village. But if we place a bed over here, this villager is able to claim it. When we place a bed right beside a villager, we're going to see it generates these green particles. This means this bed has been claimed by the villager. So the small experiment I did in order to determine if this is a village or not is by trying to summon a raid. This subject will be covered deeply on another video on this series. Let's temporarily remove the bed. Let's go away, effect, give, bad omen. Then if we come near to the house, and nothing happens. Let's put the bed back, then let's summon the knight, and since we have the bad omen effect, we summon the raid. So technically speaking, this is a village. This is the process where the raid is being summoned, and if we remove the bed, the village ceases to exist, and therefore the raid is being cancelled. Then we place the bed, the villager claims it, and it goes to sleep. If we get bad omen again, and we get near the igloo, we summon the raid. And that is one way we know that the game is recognizing this as a village. Right now it is daytime. If we break the bed, and we place a new one, you will see that this villager doesn't claim the bed immediately. Now let's repeat the experiment. We get bad omen, get near the igloo. Now this is interesting. In this experiment you're seeing that this place contains a bed and a villager, which are fundamental elements of a village. But the important thing here is that the villager has not claimed the bed. And this is what takes us to a very interesting conclusion. So at the end, what is a village? Ready for the definition? Well, a village is a bed and a villager that has claimed it. Yeah, I know this is a very simple definition, but this is it. This is a very simple, boring and not that practical village. Now let's come to this space over here, and I'm going to explain some new mechanics about the village. So I built this. First we're going to press F3 and G. All the space is divided on these columns. These columns that go from the bottom of the world all the way to the build height limit are denominated chunks. A chunk is a 16 by 16 block delimitation, including the entire height of the world. And this chunk is divided into subchunks, which have a height of also 16 blocks. So a subchunk is a subdivision of 16 by 16 by 16 blocks. Having this into account, the game interprets a village by the following way. First we're going to have these 3 fundamental points of interest. The bed, the workstation, and the bell. F3 and G. You can observe I place this point of interest in only this subchunk. For various mechanics involving a village, the game is going to determine in which subchunk these points of interest are located. In this particular case, it is only one subchunk. Then it's going to perform a search in the adjacent subchunks. Only one subchunk of distance. That is including one up and one down. So for each subchunk where a point of interest is located, there are another 26 subchunks where the game is going to perform a search for other points of interest. In this case we place this bed here. Now we're going to go a little further away. So how are these villagers going to search for nearby beds? Well, the distance is this one. In order to determine a village, for example here we have the center, the bell. The first thing the villagers do is do a search in the adjacent subchunk. But villagers have a vision distance of 2 subchunks. And when a bed is missing, for example we take this, let's go to nighttime, these villagers go to sleep. And let's suppose this villager in particular loses its bed. He's going to start searching for a bed. For example, let's play this one in the vicinity of the subchunk. The villager is going to be very able to find it. Let's come here and place this one behind the barrier. You're going to see that this villager is also capable of finding this bed because it is within the vicinity of 32 blocks of distance. In the case the villager was further away, it will not be able to find it. If we come to the second experiment, we did the following. This red subchunk is the one that I designated the main one, and here are some of the points of interest. Some workstations, beds, and of course the bell, which is going to work as the center of the village. But in this adjacent subchunk, the blue one, I have also placed a bed. So the volume of effect, where the game is going to try to search for other points of interest, has expanded, which is all this green space over here. An extra 9 subchunks, and the figure is the one you're seeing right now. In this experiment, I try to determine, given that the bell is in that subchunk over there, at what distance beds can still be considered as part of this village. Let's call that chunk 0, chunk 1, chunk 2, 3, 4, and 5. At a particular time of the day, villagers actually gather at the center of the village. Here the villagers get up of their bed and start to gather towards the center of the village. And this is a practical way to know if a particular bed placed near a bell is actually part of the village. So this is chunk 0, chunk 1, 2, 3, 4, but if the villager actually pertains to chunk 5, he is not pertaining to that village. He seems to be too far away. So this is approximately 64 blocks of distance, but in reality it is determined by the subchunk limits, F3 and G, and we can see where is the barrier between chunk 4 and chunk 5. And this is the way where this particular village is displayed on chunk 0, chunk 1, chunk 2, 3, and 4. And that way, expanding on the bed disposition, the village starts to grow. And on chunk 4 is the distance limit. And of course, for example, I can take this bed, break it, place it on this adjacent subchunk here, and now the village will have the shape of an L. We can even have a building, for example 2 or 3 floors, place a bed up here, and now this subchunk up here is now part of the village. Of course, as long as the villager can pathfind to his bed, and that way we can expand the village vertically. Remember that the bell is going to mark the center of the village, but what happens if we remove the bell? We're going to send everyone to sleep. And now we're going to set the gossip time. What should have happened is that the villagers should gather at the center of the village and start to discuss within them and spread the reputation of the players. You can see that the villagers are actually interacting between them, but they are not gathering towards a village center. We can see it is very convenient to place a bell. But now let's place this bell in another location. For example here. Now we can see green particles, and we're going to see that this means that the villagers are claiming the bell. And now it is recognized as the center of the village, and at gossip time they're going to come over here. So to summarize, let's say we have a subchunk over here, represented by this block. The game is going to try to do is perform a search over all these subchunks adjacent to the main subchunk of the village, in this space over here. Only a subchunk of distance. But of course, it is also going to perform a search on the subchunks down over here. Suppose the game actually finds a point of interest on this subchunk over here, the blue one, as I showed you on the previous experiment over here. The game is going to proceed to perform a search over these 9 additional subchunks here. Let's say also we place points of interest on these subchunks over here. Now it's going to perform another search on these additional 12 subchunks here. And that way on and on. For example, we have this green subchunk here. We're going to see because of the distance, the game can actually perform a search on this distance over here for additional subchunks. And let's say there are villagers pertaining to these blue subchunks over here. If we place a bill on the red space, they're going to gather on this point at the appropriate time of the day. But on the fifth subchunk, not. Our third experiment is going to demonstrate this. For example, here we can see the gathering point represented by the bell. On this main subchunk there are only 2 villagers living there. In the adjacent subchunk there is no bed, no villager. On the next one neither. But on the third one there is 1 bed and 1 workstation. And we can observe that the villager pertaining to the subchunk is actually gathering on the main point, the center of the village. So we don't need the subchunks to be continuously filled to pertain to a village. We can have a villager all the way over here. This is chunk 3, then chunk 4. This villager also got to the gathering point. The villager that is pertaining to this subchunk, just adjacent to chunk number 4, is that one over there. He is just wandering around, and we can see he does not pertain to this particular village, because he is too far away. Now let's come to this subchunk here, and yes, this villager is actually at the gathering point, like this L shape here. We come to this one over here, bed, workstation, he's also at the gathering point. Now we go one further away, and this subchunk also, the villager is wandering around. F3 and G, we can see the subchunks. Now at nighttime, we're going to see that all the villagers go to their respective beds, and we can see who is who. So in theory, the village area is going to be this one. We can see it recognizes some subchunks of distance. This one beside doesn't work. Now these 2 do pertain to a village. And this one also. And doing this figure all 360 degrees around, we have this figure over here. If we place the center of the village on this red subchunk here, the blue area is going to represent the area that is able to pertain to this village. And the figure will be approximately the next. This green spot over here is going to represent the area that does not pertain to the village. But just in case there is an error on this distance, I do recommend that if you build a village, you confine it within this blue area over here. So, considering that each of these glass blocks represent a subchunk, I recommend that if you build a village, you place all your points of interest of the village inside this. All on this area you can place workstations and beds. And of course remember there is some level of vertical function as the area of the village. So I did not take the time to do experiments recognizing vertical volume, mostly because pathfinding mechanics of villagers don't always work. But supposing they can pathfind and they don't care about vertical distance, the volume of search of a village will have approximately this shape. Now I want to explain you how the day cycle of the villagers work. First, let's remember that a day in Minecraft is 20 minutes in real life. And as you may see here, the point in the day is defined by the numbers in this command, which are actually game ticks. A day in Minecraft actually goes from the tick 0 to the tick 24,000. It should be approximately 1000 ticks per each hour inside the game, but the starting point is different. You may know that a day in real life actually starts at midnight and ends at midnight. Well, in the case of Minecraft it is a bit different. So now let's call the night and set the center of the village over here. And since it is bedtime, everybody goes to sleep. So right now it is 23,400. And 24,000 is just the edge of the ending of the night. So they still remain in bed. Which is very funny because this is the exact point before the day starts. But for now, the day cycle is stopped. You're going to see right now that at tick 0, the sun is actually over the horizontal, at approximately an angle of 12.5 degrees. So it is quite bright by the time the villagers get up. And at time just over 0, it is the time they get off bed. So they have a small lapse of time while they just roam around. And this is the equivalent of about 2 hours where they just roam around and do nothing else. Sometimes they interact between them. They see the baby villagers. But eventually the time to work comes, which is the tick 2000. This corresponds about 8 AM. So at this time each villager heads towards the workstation they claimed. At this time they will remain around the workstation and interact with it occasionally. This is what we denominate work. And we will hear that each workstation has its own characteristic sound. Tick 6000 is exactly midday, and the sun is exactly up there. 3 hours later it is the tick 9000. Around 3 of the afternoon it's time to stop working. And as you saw previously, tick 9000 it is time to gossip at the center of the village. They will exchange information, for example in case you already traded with one of them, so the reputation of the player is going to start to spread. And this is going to have an impact around prices for trading. Three hours later, at tick 12,000, gossip time ends. This is around 6 PM. You'll see that the sun is also elevated over the horizontal, around 12.5 degrees, and it is time for bed. Every villager is going to head towards the bed they claimed. And yeah, if you're already think about it, this is what they do. They sleep all the way from 6 PM to 6 AM, 12 hours. So the villager day cycle is approximately this. At 6 AM they get up, they roam around 2 hours. At 8 AM they go to work, till 3 PM, until it is time for gossip, and they gossip around for 3 hours, until 6 PM. Last but not least, I want to explain you how the skins of the villagers work. So we're going to see that right now. As we saw, 5 types of villagers generate naturally in the game. For example, the plains biome. This is the basic skin of the plains villager. This is the taiga villager. Now this is the desert villager. The savanna villager. This is the snow villager. And we have 2 additional skins that normally don't generate naturally. But in case a villager is born in the appropriate biome, we have 2 additional skins. This is the skin for the swamp villager, and this is the skin for the jungle villager. We will see further down the line workstations. We already saw this as point of interest of the village, and they designate the job for each villager. There are a total of 13. Considering this, we have 7 skins depending on the biome where the villager is born, so we have all these possible combinations. And of course, besides the 13 workstations that can designate the skin for the 13 professions, we also have the nitwit, which is a villager that cannot claim a workstation, neither have a profession. 13 professions plus the nitwit, which are 14, plus the 7 skins depending on the biome of the villager, that gives us a total of 98 possible combinations for villager skin. And adding to that, the 7 skins for neutral villagers that have not claimed a profession, we have a total of 105 possible combinations. And the last thing I want to tell you is that we don't necessarily have to find a village. We can build one and habitate it with villagers. We will see later that increasing the number of beds inside the village will cause the villager population to increase. They will start to breed, and that is the reason I don't like to define a village depending on the structures they generate naturally. We can actually build the houses and buildings ourselves, and playing with the mechanics involving the villagers we can habitate the village and make it grow. We will see that in another video. So our next episode will be about villagers and their mechanics, because this is a very complex and interesting mob. This has been Big Brother 161, and I'll see you on the next video.